I welcome you to our country, to the city of Manila, and to the Cathedral Basilica of the Immaculate Conception.
Devastation greeted the world as it awoke. A brief and solemn statement was issued by the Vatican in the early hours of a peaceful morning, announcing that Pope Francis had officially passed away. The beloved pontiff had passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 86, according to the information that was shared with the world. A flurry of headlines appeared. There was an outpouring of tributes from every region of the world, including heads of state, religious leaders, celebrities, and the billions of faithful people who had admired the Pope's modesty, reformist spirit, and unwavering compassion. However, something else was developing in the background of the public's grief. There was a palpable sense of unease as one entered Vatican City. Elevated members of the clergy moved swiftly through corridors that were sealed off. It was decided to relocate the Swiss guards. In addition, just a few hours after the body of the Pope was discovered, a secret meeting was held deep within the marble walls of the Apostolic Palace. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle was present at this meeting, all of which was conducted in complete silence. Tagle, a name that had been associated with the Church's bright future in the past, was now at the center of whispers that would not go away. Despite the fact that he had been one of Francis's closest confidants and someone who was considered to be his spiritual heir, one question continued to reverberate louder than the others as details of the Pope's final days began to emerge. Do you know what Cardinal Tagle knew, and why did he choose not to speak? As time went on, rumors started to spread, including those about secret documents, meetings held at the 11th hour, and a final letter that named names and warned of betrayal. There are those who believe that the Pope passed away peacefully. Those who disagree with him assert that he was silenced before he could reveal something catastrophic. All indications pointed to a single individual who had been present throughout the entire ordeal. The world was in mourning. The Church began to pray. On the other hand, a storm was brewing with the doors closed. And the information that Cardinal Tagle had about the passing of Pope Francis was about to completely alter everything. The Vatican was already in full lockdown as the sun rose over St. Peter's Basilica, casting a golden glow over Rome. At the same time, the Vatican closed its doors. Something that ought to have been a solemn period of mourning had instead become something that was significantly more concerning. The number of Swiss guards stationed at key entry points was increased, access to surveillance was restricted, and a number of high-ranking officials were given orders to remain on Vatican grounds until further notice. Officials from the Vatican Security Department and senior cardinals collaborated behind the scenes to ensure that Pope Francis's private quarters were protected. As a result of what they found inside his flat, even the most experienced assistants were taken aback. There was a concealed compartment in his study that was concealed behind a portrait of St. Augustine. Inside of this compartment was a reinforced briefcase that was later identified as the one labeled Eyes of Peter. This briefcase was a confidential vault that the Pope reportedly kept hidden from even his closest inner circle. Now, however, not everyone was in the dark about it. Among those present was Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. This individual was present in the room when the safe was found. Be a witness to the moment that would cause the very ground beneath the church to completely shift. The insiders claim that he did not say much and that he did not show any visible reaction, ask any questions, or express any concern. Multiple Vatican aides would later assert that Tagle did not appear surprised, despite the fact that this was the case. Immediately after the briefcase was delivered, it was taken to the secret archives. However, this did not occur before rumors began to circulate among the clergy. Leaks that were not verified gave the impression that the Pope had gathered evidence of corruption within the Vatican, power struggles on a global scale, and a group of cardinals who were quietly opposing his reform initiative. The tension that had been submerged for a considerable amount of time beneath the marble floors was now on the verge of erupting. There was no public statement made by Cardinal Tagle, who has been considered for a long time to be the Pope's right hand and a rumored successor. He did not agree to interviews. He withdrew from the events that were scheduled. The silence, on the other hand, only served to make matters worse. It is unclear why he was present in the room when the safe was discovered. What was the reason for his silence? Also, and this is the most unsettling question, what did he already know prior to the Pope's passing? When only a few days had passed, the walls of the Vatican had transformed from being symbols of sanctuary into fortresses of secrets. And at the heart of it all was a man who had been regarded as the Church's most promising prospect in the past, but who was now shrouded in suspicion. In order to comprehend the gravity of the suspicion that is currently surrounding Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, it is necessary to first become familiar with his meteoric rise within the Roman Catholic Church, as well as the degree to which he was truly close to Pope Francis. Tagle was well known for his gentle demeanor, his emotionally charged homilies, and his ability to connect with both clergy and laity across cultural and generational divides. Tagle was born and raised in the Philippines. He was referred to as the Asian Francis, and he exemplified everything that the Pope cherished, including reverence, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to those who were marginalized. He was being groomed to become the future of the Church, according to many people. Tagle was given the position of prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples by Pope Francis, which effectively put him in charge of the Church's efforts to spread the gospel all over the world. This is a position that carries a great deal of power. After some time, Francis elevated him to a more prominent position within the inner circle of the Vatican, which granted him access to confidential information, strategic meetings, and, according to some, the Pope's own personal confidences. They were frequently observed doing things together, such as praying side by side, speaking quietly at synods, and exchanging nods that appeared to convey an understanding that was not verbalized. "Luis is the one I trust when I trust no one else," Francis reportedly told his aides, describing their relationship as father and son. Vatican insiders described their relationship as father and son. On the other hand, trust can be a double-edged monster. In spite of the fact that their public relationship was warm and friendly, there were rumors that mounting pressure was present. Tagle was seen by many members of the Curia as a threat, or, even worse, as a puppet of a pope whom they despised. This was because Francis's reformist agenda had attracted powerful enemies within the Curia as well, not only by those who were not directly involved with Tagle, but also by those who were closest to him. It is said that the more influence Tagle gained, the more closely he was observed. Then the questions began to arise. Did Tagle have any knowledge of the forces that were assembling against the Pope? The extent of the darkness that existed within the Vatican was something that Francis had shared with him. Or had Tagle become a part of it, whether he was aware of it or not? There is a school of thought that holds that he was torn, a man caught between faith and fear, between loyalty and survival. There are those who have a more chilling suspicion, which is that Tagle was aware of everything that was going to happen, but he did nothing to stop it. In addition, if this is the case, the resignation of a well-liked pope might not be the conclusion of the story. Rather, it might be the beginning of a betrayal at the highest level of the church administration. When Pope Francis passed away, there was a private meeting that took place 3 days before his passing. This meeting was not scheduled, it was not publicly acknowledged, and it was not recorded in the official Vatican diary. The event took place in the late evening, well after the majority of the Apostolic Palace had returned to its usual state of quiet for the night. However, Pope Francis and Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle were not yet done with the night. They were not even close to being finished. The meeting reportedly lasted for close to 2 hours, according to sources within the Vatican. Not a single witness was present. Absolutely no aides, not even translators. Behind a door that was locked, there were only the two of them. An employee of the Vatican who wished to remain anonymous and who was able to hear raised voices through the thick wooden walls, stated that the conversation became increasingly tense. The Pope was reportedly overcome with emotion, as evidenced by his strained voice and rapid speech. It is said that he stated, "I have experienced the list. Your name, on the other hand, was not supposed to be there in the first place." On what list? Nobody is able to say for certain. On the other hand, there is widespread speculation that Francis has recently discovered a confidential dossier, which is a network of church insiders working behind the scenes to undermine his reforms. There was a network that apparently consisted of high-ranking cardinals, financiers, and powerful allies from around the world. There is still a lack of clarity regarding whether Tagle was being accused, warned, or simply informed. There are those who believe that the Pope was pleading with Tagle. According to him, he considered him to be his last hope. that the meeting turned out to be more of a confession than a confrontation, an attempt to transmit information that was so fraught with peril that it could only be passed on to someone he could genuinely trust. However, the events that transpired only served to further elucidate the mystery. At the time that Tagle emerged from that meeting, witnesses reported that he appeared pale and anxious. He did not communicate with anyone. As soon as he got back to his house, he abruptly canceled his scheduled public appearance for the following day without providing any explanation. After a period of 3 days, Pope Francis passed away. On the other hand, while the rest of the world was in mourning, those within the Vatican started whispering, what was discussed in that meeting? Which of the secrets were divulged? In addition, why has Cardinal Tagle remained silent about it ever since it occurred? Tagle is said to have been given a final set of instructions by the Pope, which is believed to be a blueprint for exposing the dark forces that are present within the Church. There are those who believe that Francis came to the realization that Tagle himself may have been compromised, but it was too late. A chilling timing has been used. During that particular gathering, the Pope granted a private audience for the very last time. In the years that followed, Francis was rarely seen without being in prayer. It was unusual for him to cancel 2 official engagements without a valid medical reason, but he did so in this instance. According to reports, his demeanor changed, becoming more watchful and more distant. These insiders are now wondering whether Pope Francis was aware that his time was running out. Had he made a discovery that was so significant that he was afraid he wouldn't be able to put it into action before he passed away? Moreover, the most important question is whether Tagle was the messenger or the silencer. The Vatican's grand halls are a place where answers are difficult to come by. However, there is one thing that can be said with absolute certainty. Whatever transpired behind those closed doors sealed the fate of a pope, and possibly even the Church itself. As Vatican archivists began organizing the contents of Pope Francis's private briefcase, which was ominously labeled as Eyes of Peter, they came across a sealed envelope that was only marked with one name, Luis. The envelope was handwritten in the Pope's signature script. It was a message that was personally addressed to Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, and the contents of the message were nothing short of explosive. This did not constitute a goodbye. It was not a fortunate chance. It was a strong warning. Instead of expressing affection, the letter started off with a tone of urgency. The words of Pope Francis, "Due to the fact that you have accompanied me on my journey, Luis, I have prayed for your soul more than I have prayed for my own. The fact that you are reading this indicates that I have passed away, and I do not live in peace." After that, even the experienced clerics who were present when it was read were taken aback by what transpired. Names were listed by Francis, the highest-ranking officials, people who are wealthy. There are political connections that are associated with the Church. The annotations that were placed next to each name were coded and included phrases such as compromised, black veil, obedient, and watch closely. These were not accusations. Rather, they were verdicts that were derived from the Pope's own years of private investigation with the subject. The following is a chilling passage that Pope Francis wrote near the end of the letter. "Some people will act as if they are saddened by my passing. Some people are already aware of the manner in which I will pass away. Do not put your faith in their tears." In the event that something were to happen to Tagle, he strongly encouraged Tagle to reveal the truth. He gave him the instruction to go public, to expose the darkness that was rooted in the hierarchy of the Church, and to take precautions to protect the faithful from being misled. There was a final appeal. "If you are still faithful to the light, you must not allow my death to pass without a sign of protest, because silence is the same thing as surrendering now." However, until now, the entire world has never heard a single word of this letter. This was never mentioned by Tagle. It was never acknowledged by him that it existed. During the course of the internal investigation, he was questioned, and he stated that the Pope had not left him any such message. It is impossible to avoid asking this question now that it has come to light. The question is whether Cardinal Tagle made the decision to protect the image of the Church or to protect those who wanted the Pope to be silenced. Whatever the case may be, his silence may have been the most audible form of betrayal of all. During the time that the world was reeling from the shocking contents of Pope Francis's personal letter to Cardinal Tagle, a much more mysterious document emerged from the shadows. It was a third letter, and it was never intended to be found in such an easy manner. There was no name on this letter, there was no official seal on it, and there was no indication of who the intended recipient was. It was concealed in the Pope's briefcase, which had a false bottom. An uncomplicated Latin inscription read, Ad caecos post lux, which translates to the blind after the light. It was not a letter of instruction that was in this. It was a prophecy, a message of doom that was concealed along with ominous warnings and metaphors that were unsettling. A final command was included in the document, which was written in the handwriting of Pope Francis. It described a man of grace with a divided heart, as well as truth that will bleed if buried. There is a saying that goes, "What cannot be revealed in life must scream from the silence of death." It was not just the contents of the letter that shocked Vatican investigators. Rather, it was the fact that this letter came so close to being made public that it shocked them the most. The document was initially classified as non-urgent personal material and put aside, as stated by sources within the archives. This decision was made on the recommendation of a single individual, namely Cardinal Luis Tagle. This is the same individual who had been given a direct warning by the Pope just a few days earlier. It was the same individual who had denied having any knowledge of different documents. It is possible that the third letter would have remained hidden for all time, or even worse, it could have been destroyed if a junior cleric hadn't made the accidental discovery of the hidden compartment while conducting a routine inventory. For what reason did Tagle disregard the letter? Is it possible that it was a mistake made in good faith, or was it an intentional attempt to deny Pope Francis's last and most urgent request for assistance? Many people now believe that Tagle did not simply know about the Pope's fears. Rather, he may have attempted to silence them. The Church may never admit this, but many people now believe it. The world is no longer willing to turn a blind eye to the situation. In the moment that the contents of Pope Francis's secret letters were made public, the entire world did not merely gasp. Rather, it erupted in surprise. The Catholic faithful were thrown into chaos everywhere they went, from the cathedrals in Europe to the rural churches in South America to the prayer halls in the Philippines, for example. There were those who wept openly, while others demanded answers right away. Moreover, in cities all over the world, places that were once considered sacred have become battlegrounds for belief and betrayal. Overwhelmed and heartbroken, a large number of Catholics came together in support of the deceased Pope, referring to him as a martyr who had died in an effort to purge the Church of its most ingrained corruption. Violent demonstrations were held with banners that read, "Francis spoke the truth." However, an equal number of people were furious, not at the Pope, but at the betrayal that occurred from within. Everyone's attention was focused on Cardinal Luis Tagle. Why had he not made any statement? What reason did he have for not protecting the truth? The final letters were almost completely forgotten, which begs the question, if he was truly loyal to Pope Francis, why did he let them go? It was not with reverence that Tagle's name became popular around the world. Rather, it was with hashtags such as what did Tagle know and justice for Francis. A number of cities, including Manila, Rome, and Buenos Aires, witnessed demonstrations calling for the Vatican to ensure complete transparency. For the purpose of questioning their clergy, parishioners interrupted the Mass. Donations experienced a precipitous decline, and for the first time in decades, there was a teetering on the brink of collapse of trust in the highest officials of the Church. There was a deepening of divisions within the Vatican. An investigation was demanded by reformists. However, traditionalists resisted, claiming that critics were attempting to undermine the unity of the Church. The fact that Tagle himself remained silent only served to stoke the flames of discontent, as the gap between the faithful and their leaders grew wider with each passing hour that passed without an explanation. In the past, Pope Francis had expressed concern about an impending schism, a time when the truth would cause the Church to partition. The time had finally come for that moment. In addition to this, it was causing the establishment to fall apart, one revelation at a time. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle finally broke his silence after weeks of mounting pressure, outrage from around the world, and unrelenting speculation from the media. He appeared to be troubled, exhausted, and visibly emotional during a television interview that was broadcast from the press hall of the Vatican. This interview was highly anticipated. The trembling hands, red-rimmed eyes, and the crucifix that he was holding tightly in his palm were all captured by the cameras as they zoomed in on him. Tagle started off by saying, "I loved Pope Francis like a father," and his voice was shaking. "The news of his passing has left me inconsolable, and these allegations and insinuations have cut me more deeply than I am able to express." As tears streamed down his face, the cardinal wept openly and paused several times to catch his breath. He swore that he had never betrayed the trust of the Pope, denied that he had anything to do with any letters, and insisted that he was unaware of any conspiracy. The statement that he made was, "If there were secrets, they were kept from me as well." However, despite the fact that some people were moved, many others remained unconvinced. Individuals who specialize in body language analyzed each and every gesture and twitch, pointing out inconsistencies in his posture and tone of voice. Whenever he was questioned about the concealed letters, his voice broke, but never otherwise. When the topic of discussion shifted to the third letter, his eyes began to well up, but they dried up more quickly than usual. The fact that he never once addressed the reasons why his name was included in the Pope's warning, or the reasons why he remained silent about the private meeting that took place days before the death, was brought up by critics. The interview was described as a carefully staged act by former Vatican aides, who described it as an image cleanse rather than a confession. The responses on social media were swift and varied in their opinions. The interview was praised as courageous and heartfelt by supporters, who trended the hashtag number #PrayForTagle. People who disagreed with him responded with hashtags such as Tagle knew and crocodile tears, accusing him of manipulating people's emotions. A great number of people found that the interview did not answer all of their questions. Was Cardinal Tagle grieving the loss of a friend, or was he trying to tell a lie? Was this a vulnerability, or was it a calculated performance with the intention of continuing to conceal the truth for all time? It is no longer the question of whether Cardinal Luis Tagle knew something. Rather, the question that is resonating louder than prayers in the halls of the Vatican is how much he knew, as well as whether he was a passive witness or an active player in the events that led to the death of Pope Francis. It is unsettling to see the evidence. This was just a few days before the Pope passed away, and he was there to witness the secret meeting. He was present in the room when the secret briefcase was found for the first time. Although he had access to confidential documents, including a letter that was addressed specifically to him, he did not disclose any of the information that he had access to. What is perhaps the most damning of all is the fact that the now famous third letter, which was a spiritual and strategic nuclear bomb, was almost completely eradicated while he was in charge. There are those who believe that no one who was so close to the pontiff could have been so completely unaware of the situation. He was either complicit or completely negligent, said an insider spokesperson for the Vatican, who wished to remain anonymous. And neither of these options is acceptable. It has been reported that a number of high-ranking officials are now calling for a comprehensive investigation, despite the fact that the Vatican continues to deflect, insisting that the matter has been internally resolved. Some individuals go even further. According to those who have come forward with information, Tagle may have been a prominent member of a conservative group that was opposed to the progressive reforms that Pope Francis was implementing, particularly his efforts to combat financial corruption and his vision for a church that is more inclusive and decentralized. According to this theory, Tagle, who was once considered Francis's golden child, ultimately became a silent enabler of those who desired the removal of the Pope, or at the very least, silenced him. Those who support Tagle, however, argue that he is a scapegoat because he is caught in a spiritual and political storm that is larger than any one individual. They say that he is grieving, that he was taken by surprise, and that he will remain loyal until the very end. However, even they have a hard time explaining his lack of action. Torn between two different truths, the world has been left to speculate about what they might be. Was Tagle simply unable to act on what he knew because he was too afraid? Did he choose to be loyal to the institution rather than to the papal trust? Or, even more chilling, was he a part of the very machine that Pope Francis spent his final years with the intention of dismantling? The lack of communication, the concealment of information, and the inconsistencies all point to a single catastrophic possibility. It was not just that Tagle knew. He might have been a factor in keeping the truth hidden. On one occasion, Cardinal Luis Tagle was considered to be the future of the Catholic Church. He was regarded as a gentle reformer, a beacon of hope, and a spiritual bridge between the East and the West. However, in light of the fact that Pope Francis passed away and the revelations that came along with it, the legacy he left behind is currently in jeopardy. A curtain that very few people have ever had the courage to look behind has been pulled back thanks to the documents, letters, and hidden warnings. In addition, what they disclosed was not merely a case of corruption, but also a profound breach of trust. An individual who was in possession of the Pope's ear, and possibly the chance to save him, was at the center of everything that was going on. In the absence of a definitive answer, the question of whether Tagle was complicit, coerced, or simply cowardly remains unanswered. The fact that he was in a position of power, that he possessed knowledge, and that he chose to remain silent when the world required the truth cannot be denied. The Pope, Francis, made an effort to purify the Church from the inside out. The burden of a war that few people knew he was fighting was carried by him when he passed away. And it's possible that the individual he entrusted with that responsibility allowed it to fall back into the shadows. The Church is now confronted with a reckoning. Believers' faith has been shattered. Still, questions remain. In addition, the individual who was once considered to be the successor to St. Peter is now being surrounded by uncertainty, mainly due to the fact that the truth was not buried with Pope Francis in the end. Those who were within the closest proximity to him buried it, but they did not speak a word.